Good morning. How are we doing today? My name is James Sweeney, aka SplitSuit. Welcome back to another video. And today we're going to run through the river play when making bets section of the Postflop workbook, go through page 197 together. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Alright, so the prompt for this one is, with blinds at 501k in a tournament, they call your open raise, you delay c-bet the turn, and they check the river. So pot right this moment is 14k, they check, and here we are, we're deciding what we want to do on the river, check it behind, or make a bet. This is the range they have right this exact moment, and let's first start by looking at the EV of checking. So in this situation, if we just start factoring everything and putting everything into Flopzilla, we have king of spades, king of diamonds, we have ace of diamonds, six of clubs, five of hearts, 10 of clubs, deuce of spades, all right, ace, 6, 5, 10, deuce, perfect, excellent. We need their range, so we can grab that right from the answer key, page 197, copy that, and throw it into Flopzilla. Excellent, and here we are. So we notice that if we keep all the filters down here red, which means we're looking at all possible hands in here, we need to look at our total equity right this moment, which is 68%. So the EV of checking, if we throw that into our spreadsheet, this is the river bet versus check spreadsheet. Pot size is what, 14k, 14, 1, 2, 3. The check and win percentage we just said was 68%, right? Pull that out of Flopzilla, 68%, perfect, and there we are. So EV is positive to the tune of 9520. Excellent, and now we can start rocking and rolling. And down below, we're breaking this into two different sections. So question one is they give one bet action, and they give it with this range of hands. And then number two is, okay, different bet size, probably a different continuance set, and then how does all of that factor in? And these numbers right here are just fill-ins for what you would throw into the complex EV equation. We're going to use this spreadsheet just because it's a little bit simpler, but you could definitely use the complex EV complex EV calculator if you want to. Totally your call. I'm just going to use the spreadsheet to save us a little bit of time. So without further ado, let's jump into number one and then do number two right after that. All right, so number one says you bet 5k and you think they're only going to give your 5k bet action with what? Middle pair, jacks, top pair, or two pair, and then there's an X for third pair, so they're not going to call with third pair, they're just going to fold it instead. So if we were to throw all that into Flopzilla, we're going to only tick middle pair or better, which means everything else is folding, which in this situation is just pocket pairs below second card, which means they are continuing 82% of the time and folding that 18%. So 18% goes right there, which means they're continuing, obviously, the inverse of that, which we just said. And your equity when they continue. So again, we have all of our filtered hands right here in blue. We're going to tick this over to green to lock it in and just factor in what our equity looks like against that. And our equity is going to be 61%. So obviously this is assumingly pretty high, probably higher than you would expect, and that's mostly because we're getting called by second best hands, things like pocket jacks, things like 10x, all that's being factored in here, which is why our equity is pretty darn high in this spot. So if we were to go back to the spreadsheet and start putting the numbers in, so the bet size that we're looking at right this moment, we said a 5k bet, so throw that in, one. Perfect, and our win percentage when called, we said was 61%, and how often are they going to fold? We said that at 18, perfect, excellent. So in this spot, betting 5k actually has pretty darn good EV at positive 10, 425, excellent. All good. Check the answer key just to make sure we're on the right track. So betting 5k, the overall EV is 10, 425. Perfect. So we did all that correctly. Now let's do number two together. All right, so for number two, we're using a different bet size. So if they only give your 12k bet action, so almost a pot size bet, you think they're only going to do so with top pair plus, so top pair and two pair, and they're going to fold things like jacks and middle pair and still folding that same third pair. So if we go back into Flopzilla and we undo this and we change the modifier, right? So I think they're only going to give action with top pair or better. We should notice two things very, very quickly. One, they are continuing much less often, right? They're continuing now 32% of the time, folding 68. We just plug those numbers right in here. So 68%, we have 32%. And also what should be pretty obvious is that when we lock this in, our equity is going to be very, very different, right? Our equity is much higher when we were getting called by jacks and middle pair, and as such, our kings performed well. But in this situation, when we lock this in against top pair or better, we have 0% equity, right? Because we're not getting called by anything that we beat or even chop against. So in this situation, our equity is going to be 0%. So now, when we start factoring everything in, we can start looking at the EV down below, and our bet size is not going to be 5K anymore. It's going to be 12K. Perfect. Our win percentage when called is 0. That's our equity that we just calculated. And how often are they folding? Well, they're folding 68% of the time. So we notice that our overall equity is 5,680. Perfect. And this should all make a little bit of sense. And, just in general, when you bet bigger, typically people continue with fewer hands, fold more, but that also means that things can shift in terms of your equity when called. When you're betting much smaller, right, roughly third pot like we did in number 1, all of a sudden you can have very, very different equity based upon what's continuing. This can be very, very good whether you're folding, whether you're trying to get thinner value, that sort of fun stuff. And if we check the answer key real quick, again, page 197, looking at the 12K bet, 5,680, perfect. We got everything correct in this spot. So again, this spreadsheet, very, very helpful for just making quick work of these kinds of exercises. Make sure that you take your time with Flopzilla. When you're locking things in, make sure you're looking at the folding percentage kind of just before that. And then when you're looking for your equity, make sure to lock in the range and then check right over here. So hopefully this helps. Again, the big takeaways here are comparing how things look when you're checking, when you're betting different sizes, looking at different options and different possible continuances. You could break this kind of exercise out a bunch of different ways, right? You could look at slightly different bet sizes. Okay, what if you bet 7K instead and they folded middle pair but continue with jacks, whatever. You could go a lot further with this if you wanted, but this is very, very helpful to say, okay, well, what is the EV of a check in the first place? Most people don't really have any idea. And then they really have maybe only looked at like one bet size and they probably haven't looked at the EV of it. So this is going to force you to walk through a couple of those and again see how things stack up when comparing all the possible options that you have available. And not even all, just more options than most people even consider in the first place. So hopefully this helps. Now you understand the process for doing these exercises. If you have any comments or questions, don't hesitate to let me know. Otherwise, as always, good luck out there and happy grinding.